Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, and honestly, you have no idea how nice it is to be sitting here and doing a sit-down video for you guys. It's been a minute. I definitely underestimated the amount of stress and the amount of time that goes into moving house, and so yeah, I kind of took an unexpected YouTube and booktube break to focus on moving into my new house. If you want to hear more about that experience and get sneak peeks of my Victorian home, I will link my reading and moving vlog for you. But today's video, I figured I would jump right back in with a tag. It is mid-year freakout tag time, and I am freaking out. I definitely have not read as much as I would have liked to by this point in time in the year. I think if I look at the story graph, it says I'm like 8 books behind schedule, which is a lot for me, but basically the last few months I have just not had the time, the energy, the inclination to read because I've just been so stressed and preoccupied with other things. That thankfully seems to be changing as I've gotten through nearly 2 audiobooks since I moved in, Friday, so a week from tomorrow on the day that I am filming this. So fingers crossed, but why don't we dive into the mid-year freakout tag, and yeah, let's just go for it. All right, so question number 1 in this tag is best book you've read so far in 2022, and that is hands down Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively. Listen, I have a whole video on my Q1 book bracket, and that was the one that came out a winner. I am absolutely obsessed. Have you ever had that moment when you've read a book and you want to know why it took you so long to read this book, because it just speaks to you on such a level? This is a book that there are certain passages that still hold real estate in my mind from when I read it at the beginning of the year. I haven't stopped thinking about them. It's a book that the main character, Claudia, won me over with her sort of big ego and just wit and cleverness and just the way that she kind of grabs life by the balls, for lack of a better expression. She's just phenomenal. It's such a heartbreaking and poignant book too in a lot of ways, and it's one of the few 5-star reads that I've had this year. I don't think I actually had any in Q2, so April, May, and June. But that book has a very special place in my heart, and it's a book that I definitely want to reread. But this is one of those books that, if there was a book that I reread every year, at the same time every year, it would be that one. Okay, moving right along. Question 2 is best sequel you've read so far in 2022. I've said this on this channel before. I am not a huge book series reader, and I think that just comes hand in hand with the genres that I most typically read. I read historical fiction, literary fiction, nonfiction, some general fiction, but those aren't the genres you think of when you think series. You think sci-fi and fantasy and even mystery. So I don't have a lot of books to choose from with this one. But I would say that the best sequel that I have read would be the 2 books in the Regeneration trilogy, which is in fact a historical fiction trilogy set during World War I. The Eye in the Door is book 2, and then it's followed up by Ghost Road. And those 2 books by Pat Barker are great. The series itself is pretty short. I don't think any of the books hit 300 pages, so it is a pretty quick read, but it is just so interesting to have this perspective on World War I that I hadn't seen before. The premise of the book is that these soldiers who are on the front in France end up experiencing PTSD, or shell shock as it was called back then, and having to be sent to war hospitals to be treated for it. And the psychiatrist is meant to basically cure them so that he can send them back to the front. And obviously World War I had a huge casualty rate. And so it's a book that has this definite anti-war leaning, and it looks at the mental and emotional toll that the war has had on these men. It looks at the ways in which society treats those men, the way society scapegoats individuals, and that sort of thing. And it is really, really moving and gritty. They are not easy books to read because of the subject matter. They are on the slightly heavier and more serious side of things, but Pat Barker's writing is always just incredible. She definitely knows how to write a sentence, let's put it that way. But yeah, so of the books that could potentially be sequels, those are the two that I would definitely say were the best. Question 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. One of the ones that I actually own that I'm very excited to read is The Duchess Countess by Catherine Osler. It's nonfiction, and it's about Elizabeth Chudley, who is this 18th century sensation who is put on trial for bigamy. So she marries 2 men, which is how I assume she becomes both a countess and a duchess at the same time. And according to the information I've seen on the book, she is the inspiration between Becky Sharp in Vanity Fair, and this trial and this sensational news was bigger news in England at the time than the War of Independence in the colonies. So it sounds like it's just going to be really, really fascinating, and I'm here for it. I have the book. It has a striking cover, as you will see when I put it on the screen, but this is definitely something that I want to read sooner rather than later. I do think what I want to do is to read this and then maybe read Vanity Fair afterwards, since one is inspired by the other. I think it would be an interesting pairing there for sure. But yeah, that's one of the many, many new releases that I am excited about. Next up is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So I really need to do some digging into the books that are coming out during the next few months, because I haven't, because of everything else that's been going on in my life. But I know the book that I am really excited about that's coming out in September is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. She wrote Hamnet, which I have not read, and I know is a huge oversight for me. Although, I honestly don't know why I haven't picked it up, because it sounds right up my alley. But The Marriage Portrait, when I saw that this was announced, I want to say at the end of the year or maybe very early in 2022, I got very excited. This is a novel on Lucrezia de Medici during the Italian Renaissance, and for anyone who doesn't know, I went through a phase probably towards the end of high school and the beginning of college where I was obsessed with the Italian Renaissance. I picked up every single historical fiction that was written on the Borgias, the de Medicis, the Sforzas, anything and everything I just devoured. So there's a part of me that is still very, very interested in that time period, and so I'm very excited about this book in particular. The cover is also stunning, but yeah, this is the one that I feel like will introduce me to Maggie O'Farrell, and then I should really pick up Hamnet, because yeah, I still don't understand why I have never read that book, because as I said, it sounds like something I would really, really enjoy, but this one does too. So I'm very excited about that. Okay, So biggest disappointment. You know, I haven't had a great reading year so far. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't had that many 5-star reads. I've had quite a few 4.5 star reads and the like, but I've definitely had my fair share of mediocre to just not great reads, unfortunately. As far as disappointing reads though, I think I would have to say The Rebel Nun by Marge Charlier. This was a book that I bought last year and I was really, really excited about it. I talked about it constantly on this channel. I think I convinced other people to buy it. It's this book that is about this rebellion led by a bunch of nuns in, I think, basically the Middle Ages, and they rebel against like the church and patriarchy, and what is not to love about some feminist nuns from back in the day, all based on a true story. I was so excited. This sounded amazing. Unfortunately, the actual execution of the book wasn't as good as the premise, and it fell a little bit flat for me. I think it was partly because there was a lot of repetition with the way that cloistered nuns live, but also the fact that really not a whole lot seemed to happen until the last like 100 or so pages of the book. It kind of just dragged, and you were reading, waiting for something to happen, and you just were kept waiting and waiting and waiting. So it wasn't the best reading experience for me. I would also say that I wasn't in love with any of the characters. I do feel like the good characters were very much like white knights type characters, and then the bad characters were like the ones that you would see in black armor with a black steed in like one of those movies. Like you can very, very easily tell the distinction. There was no nuance. There was a lack of complexity, unfortunately. So I would have to say that was my biggest disappointment, just because I had hyped it up so much in my own mind. Okay, next, moving from disappointment to biggest surprise. And this was really, really a surprise for me. This was The King of Infinite Space by Lindsay Fay, which I think was actually the first book that I read in 2022. I read it for Noelle's Hot Girl Book Club, and it's a contemporary retelling of Hamlet. But this is not a book that I would have picked up on my own because of the contemporary setting, even though it is an adaptation of Hamlet. But I was honestly floored by how much I enjoyed this book. It had LGBTQ representation, it was feminist, it had New York as a setting, it addressed neurodiversity and neurodivergence, and it was just such a fun little romp. I think what I liked about it is that all of the characters that had their own POV felt unique, and there were stylistic choices that helped you to see which character you were talking about, even within just the writing style itself. But really what I enjoyed was the fact that even though you could very clearly see that this was an adaptation of Hamlet, you still didn't know how this book was going to end. There were still delightful little surprises and twists and turns that made it a really compelling read, that made it an interesting read, and gave you that feeling that this was an original work, even though it is based on something as famous, even though it was based on something as famous as Hamlet itself. So I really, really enjoyed that, was so glad that I got to read that with Noelle, because that was not a book that was on my radar, and honestly, I would not have picked it up on my own if I had passed it in a bookstore. So that was really a surprise for me. Favorite new author? This is not going to be a surprise because Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively is my favorite book so far this year, and Penelope Lively is a new to you author. I had never heard of her before. I think she's written some like YA or children's books, and then she has some other like adult fiction as well. But there's something about her writing style. As I mentioned, I want to reread Moon Tiger already, but I am eager to also check out some of her other books as well. There's just something in her writing style that I think just speaks to me. There's something very, very intelligent without being like over the top and pretentious. So yeah, I'm very excited to explore her backlist a little bit more, but I would say that she's probably my new favorite author of the year so far, just because I've also read quite a few books by authors that I'm already familiar with so far this year. But standout author, Penelope Lively, for sure. Okay, newest fictional crush. I know I shouldn't, but Jem Merlin in Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. He is a bad boy. He is problematic. We're not gonna deny that. I mean, he's a horse thief. His family is not great. He does some questionable things during the book, and I don't necessarily like him or believe him with the main character of Mary Yellen in Jamaica Inn. I do think that their love affair ends up feeling a little bit rushed because they have some banter. Like, they spend a day together, they kiss, and all of a sudden she's in love with him. I don't know if I buy that, but him as a character, if you like a dark, broody, sort of Byronic hero type character, it's him. He's a troubled child. I get that. Part of me just wants to fix him. I do realize that is a character flaw in me, but there was just something there, even though I know I shouldn't. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's the forbidden fruit thing. But yeah, it's definitely him, although a close second, I would have to say, would be the Duke of Weston in The Duke Undone. He is also a bit of a troubled boy, but I do like him as well. So apparently I have a thing for that type of misunderstood, sort of gray, morally gray character. Jem is definitely more morally gray by far than the Duke of Weston, though. They're kind of like comparing apples to oranges, but yeah, that's my answer. That's my rambling answer. I'm sorry. We're gonna move on to the next question, which is newest favorite character. I've spoken about her already in my first answer. It's gonna be Claudia from Moon Tiger. I am obsessed. She's a character that I want to be best friends with. I want to invite her to dinner. I'm just obsessed for all of the reasons I already stated. She is clever, she is sassy, she has an ego. Her view of the world is just so unique, and I mean, that's part of what made Moon Tiger interesting in the first place, because it is from her POV. She's an old woman she's an old woman on her deathbed recounting the history of the world through the lens of her own life. And it's just wonderful to hear about her relationships with her brother, her lover, her child's father, her child, to see her relationship and placement within history itself. She's just one of those characters that I wish it was a series so that you could actually have more of her, because the one book was not enough, in my opinion. So yes, that's my answer there. The next question is a book that made you cry. And to be honest, there are probably a few, because I am a big crybaby. Like, cry at commercials, cry during movies, cry during TV shows. Definitely cry during books. But the one that sticks out for me at this particular moment would be A Well-Behaved Woman by Therese Ann Fowler, which is on the Vanderbilts, and particularly on Alva Vanderbilt. And I can't say much about why I cried during that book because it would spoil things. It is a novelization of her life, so like if you Wikipedia'd her, you could probably figure out why I ugly sobbed during this book, but it was beautiful. I think it's because I really connected with the character of Alva Vanderbilt and all that she was trying to accomplish during her lifetime. But that was a book that definitely had me misty-eyed when I was reading it, and it was a delight. I have another book by the same author that I am eager to read as well, but yes, that was the book that definitely tugged on my heartstrings. So the next question is a book that made you happy. Now, all books make me happy in some way because I delight in reading them, as any fellow bookworm can attest. But if I think about the book that kind of just was heartwarming, I would have to say it was The Duke Undone, which maybe that's just because it was the most recent book, but it's a historical romance, so there is just this like joy and delight in it because you do know more or less how it's going to end. It's a romance, so you know that despite all the odds, these two characters are going to overcome them to be together, and there's just something really hopeful and optimistic about that in historical romances and romances in general. And like, I just really loved the characters. I thought they were sweet and endearing. I loved Lucy and her passion for art and her passion for her family and wanting to protect their home. I love the Duke of Weston, Antony, and the way that he kind of inadvertently finds himself wanting to be better because of Lucy. And even though some of the like subject matter that is touched upon, which is historical to the time, whether it was alcoholism, housing, mental illness, that sort of thing, even though those topics are there, the heart of the story, this romance, these two characters were just absolutely delightful. So a book that made me happy, that one definitely did that. Next, we have the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. So, as you can see, I'm not with my books currently. My office/library has not been set up yet. So all of my books are currently in boxes. So I had to do some thinking. And the cover that I remember being really excited about when I bought it was the Nancy Mitford, The Pursuit of Love book cover. It's very, very simplistic, but this is a cover for a UK edition, so I purposefully went out of my way to get that one because I enjoyed it more than the others. And like I said, it is a very, very understated and simple cover, but I really like it. I don't know what more to say about that. There's just something really nice about it. So I'm gonna go with that one, even though I can't dig it out from my 1,000,001 book boxes. So just sorry, I can't give you a more creative answer than that. And lastly, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? All of the books. Like literally all of the books. I don't think there is particularly one book that I am like, no, it must be done by the end of the year. I just want to read more than I have in the last couple of months. Like, I've really fallen off that bandwagon and kind of not stuck with my routine, unfortunately. and I really want to fix that. I want to read more really good historical fiction. I want to read more nonfiction for sure, more translated works. I want to just read and enjoy it. So I know that is not really a great answer to that question, but there isn't, as I said, a particular book. It's more of a vibe that I'm going for. Just give me all the books and I am more than happy to read them. I think it will be really difficult for me to hit like my reading goal this year unless I like really, really hustle. And that's okay. This is quality, not quantity. That's the name of the game. So yeah, that's my really non-answer to this question, unfortunately. But yeah, that is everything for the mid-year freakout tag. As I said at the beginning of this video, I am freaking out slightly and trying not to because, you know, reading, it's not a race. It is not a numbers game, even though I really love looking at stats. That's not the point of it. The point of it is just to read and enjoy and escape into these worlds and to learn things and to just have fun while doing it. So I always try to remind myself of that when I think of this tag, because it is very easy to kind of freak out if you're behind with your Goodreads or Storygraph reading challenges or what have you. But I'm just gonna enjoy the rest of the year and see what happens. I obviously had a lot of stuff going on in the first half of the year, and hopefully now, as I get settled into my new home and into a new routine, I can read more and do that. So yeah, that's it, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, because all of those things help this little channel grow, and they mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!